Welcome to Hollywood. That's right, I am in Hollywood, but no, not where the movie stars are in California. This is Hollywood, Florida. I've been to the California one a bunch of times. I have to say that Hollywood, Florida is way more beautiful. So today we are going to talk about cutthroat negotiation tactics. Now, I'm not just teaching you the tactics so you could use them. I'm kind of teaching them for the purpose of not getting taken advantage of by seasoned negotiators who utilize these things. They can really take a good advantage of a person who's not experienced. And today we're going to learn about those tactics so when they're used against you, you can identify them. The first tactic we're going to discuss is something that really genuinely happened to me. I'm going to change the numbers, the financial numbers, but the actual experience was really there. Okay, when I was at the beginning of my career, I was doing web development, and I pitched to a company, I'm going to create this website for you, including graphic design and back-end programming. I'm going to use a price, and I'm making up the price, not what I quoted them, but let's say $2,000, right? Okay, great. They said, well, how much of that is the web development and how much of that is the graphic design? I said, and then I came up with some division, probably 1,000 and 1,000, I'm just making that up. And they said, okay, we only want the web development, not the graphic design. We have our own in-house designer. Boom, they cut my entire project price in half, right then and there. When people break down your costs, that's right there a cut-throat negotiation tactic. Don't let people take your package deal and divide it up. Okay, what I should have said and what I would do today, this is a package deal. If you want just programming, I have to reassess it and make them wait for the answer of how much it's really going to cost. Because that's probably where they are going to say, oh, okay, well, maybe how much is it, you know, and start messing around. But once you break it down, they have the option to take it and just take part of it. And your whole package price gets like cut up. You don't want that. All right, next thing, which is probably one of the more common cutthroat negotiation tactics, whoever says the price first basically loses. However, there's a caveat to that, okay? Because if you push that too hard, you have to remember there is someone still in control, whoever's paying the bill, meaning whoever's paying that price is still in control at the end. So what does this all mean? When you have a negotiation, if someone says, I want to buy that car over there, right? How much does that car cost? Actually, you know what? This is far more cooler. These two hands up here. I want to buy these hands. I have, let's say, in my head of an idea that I'll pay $200 for them. If the guy says the price is 100, well, he just lost out $100. I was ready to pay 200. If the guy says 500, I'll probably walk away and not buy them. Whoever says that number first basically loses. However, whoever is holding the cash does have the final say. Now, what does that mean? I once had a job candidate who refused to tell me how much money they wanted for that role. Meaning, I was asking them, what's the salary requirements you want? And they just wouldn't give in. And now they knew this tactic. They realized that whoever says the first number loses, to the point where they actually verbalized that to me. I said, that's great, but I'm still comparing you with other candidates. How much do you want? Eventually, they did not break down. And I broke down. And what does that mean? I'm not gonna tell them what my budget is. I simply said, I can't work with you. That's frustrating. So don't forget, whoever says the first number does lose, but whoever holds the money still has the final say. So don't go crazy with that. Meaning, if you gotta lose a little bit, leave some money on the table, it's worth it if you, instead of losing the whole deal. Just make it worth your while. Say a number that, you know, you're happy with, even if you lost a few bucks in the process. Another cutthroat negotiation tactic comes down to rushing the candidate you're negotiating with. Now, that sounds kind of trivial, but hear me out. Okay, let's say you are trying to get a number out of the other person because you want them to give that number. You pressure them unnaturally, artificially, saying, you got to tell me how much this is now or I will walk right now. And you don't give that person enough time to take in the criteria that they need in order to accurately analyze the pricing. You don't even necessarily give them the full idea of what scope of work needs to get done. So you're pressuring them to give you the number by using that pressure, that time pressure, saying, if you don't tell me right now, I'm gonna walk. That automatically gives the feeling that there's a scarcity, that they're gonna lose the opportunity, okay? And if they don't respond quickly, they will lose the opportunity. And by doing that, they will throw out a number without actually analyzing what's accurate and correct. So had they had more time to analyze what the scope of work is, what they have to do and all that, they may not give you the same response. But the cutthroat negotiator knows that, and they pressure for like, I need the number now, or I'm gonna go to somebody else. And that is a tactic that is commonly used. Now, besides understanding scope, there's the other aspect of not revealing the full scope of work and then having scope creep later. Scope creep means that the work gets bigger as you go. Now, how do they do that without being in like violation of contracts or whatever else? The way they do that is by not setting a concrete endpoint, meaning when is the work actually done? What constitutes completed work? Well, that has to be set in your agreement. So if you say, I'm gonna build you a website, well, when is the website done? Does it have this feature? Does it not have this feature? What do you have to do to say this website has completed the whole scope? Most people do not set that in much detail, and that's a mistake, because the person can say, whoa, I needed the website to do this, I needed to do that, and you're not done yet. And you may never be done with that kind of agreement, literally. And then the other aspect that they will commonly do is say, well, I expected the website to do this, but you didn't build that, so I'm gonna only give you a portion of the work. Ouch, that's cutthroat negotiation tactics, okay? Don't fall for that. Set scope up front. You say, this is what I'm delivering. This constitutes completion of work. When this is done, XYZ is functional and this is done, that constitutes completion of work. And at that point, I gotta get paid. Whatever hasn't been paid up front has to be paid in completion at that point. That's the bottom line. Now, there's something called the triple constraint. Triple constraint means the scope, the schedule, and the amount of money all have to go together. The budget, scope, and schedule all work with each other. If you stretch one, you gotta stretch one of the other two, otherwise quality suffers. So what does that mean? Someone says, this is the scope of work today, and this is the budget. Tomorrow they add to the scope of work. Well, you gotta add budget too. You can't just, I'm not gonna just start doing more work because you asked for it. You gotta also pay more. Or extend the schedule. Sometimes that's acceptable to do that. Well, it's no longer a rush job, but can you add this in? Okay, maybe that could work. All right, so scope, schedule, and budget, they all kind of work together in the triple constraint. If one goes, then the other goes. If none of them go and you just extend one or the other, then what you end up with is a lower quality of deliverable work. Why? Because you're rushing through the job, because you're frustrated, or sometimes you get a disgruntled employee who gets fed up with that stuff, says he's done before he's actually done. That happens very frequently. It's very annoying actually when they do that. Oh yeah, I'm 90% done. Meantime, they're like 5% done, okay? And then you as the employer don't even know what to do because they're claiming to be done and they're clearly not. In fact, that's actually the way that most employees get back at their employer when they use these cutthroat hiring tactics, is they find ways to cut corners with the work and tell them they're done when they're not done, which is terrible for an employee, for an employer. Absolutely terrible. They think the work is done. Meantime, it ain't done. Or sometimes they'll just literally mark it done without doing the work. I've seen that. That's a messed up employee. They get fired for that, by the way. That doesn't last long, but it's very annoying because you as the employer have to manage the project scope. What you're doing, make sure things get done. You're under the impression, because they marked the project done, that it's done. You tell the client, oh, the work is done, but it's not done. And now you're at ground zero and you gotta start again. And you just fired the dude who just did that. So it really does screw over the employer when you do those things. So number one, don't get suckered into going beyond the scope you agreed on. And if you do, don't screw your employer. You should have said no, man. Now, one way to make sure this does not happen, this whole thing where you get the disgruntled employee, is simply asking them, what do you need in order to be happy and satisfied doing this work every day? How much money do you need? Ask them. Let them tell you how much money. Now, that is indeed a cutthroat negotiation tactic because you're putting the pressure of how much money on the employee. However, it's very effective because whatever they say, they're going to be happy with. They're not going to tell you, unless they are maybe afraid of losing the job, but they shouldn't really be telling you an amount that they're unhappy with. Therefore, they're going to tell you an amount, and if you don't negotiate down from that, you got a happy employee, not a disgruntled one. That's important. You want everyone working for you to be happy doing the work. Otherwise, you get low quality work. Low quality work is misery. You want people to be happy and be enthusiastic to work every day. The bottom line when hiring people is not to hire them so they work below their baseline rate. You want everybody to be happy, and they should set that baseline for you. What you can do to further add incentive is you add bonuses for early delivery and you add penalties for late delivery. But be careful, because when people go very, very, very late, those penalties can add up and remove the incentive for them to even complete the project. And on that note, what happens when a person just simply cannot deliver? Make sure when you are negotiating with people, there's always clauses. What happens if the other person you're negotiating with does not deliver or simply disappears and stops answering you? You have to have a certain time limit. After X amount of time, if we don't hear from you, you're done. That's it. And we don't have to pay you. That's important, because that happens. You have contractors who disappear on you. So when you're negotiating, you want to make sure there's an out, meaning that if the person is so not living up to their half of the negotiation, they don't you don't anymore have any obligation towards them. You could just walk away. The triple constraint is your friend. You got to be aware of what it is and how to utilize it. The person you're negotiating with says, after you've already come to an agreement, oh, by the way, we also want this. And you say, oh, you want me to add that to the scope? That's great. I need this much extra money, and it's gonna take me that much longer, because scope, if the scope extends, you have to take from one or both of the other two parts of that triangle, the schedule and the budget. Okay, you cannot extend only one without impacting quality. What does that mean? It means if you don't give me more money or budget, I'm gonna do a half job because I ain't happy anymore. You know what I mean? You're working me beyond my baseline. So use that as part of negotiation tactics. When they want more scope, add to the budget or add to the schedule. This is your power, that triple constraint. In order to protect yourself against cutthroat negotiators, one other thing you should always do is research the market. Who is available to do the same work you're proposing at a different price? Okay, are there people on the other side of the world, offshore workers, who can work at way less than you and complete the work? If you are, you have to be prepared with some persuasive answer for when the client says, well, I could hire this guy in so-and-so country for 5% of what I'm paying you. Why should I hire you? You have to have an answer for that. That's actually a fairly common cutthroat negotiation tactic, to say to someone, well, I could get this person over there for so much money, why should I hire you? And you got to be prepared for the answer to that. Now, the other aspect of that coin is, it's genuinely hard to compete with offshore workers. So it's a reasonable request. Quality is usually the biggest influential difference, meaning that when you work with someone local, you generally get better quality, generally, not as a rule, but as a generality, than you do when working with offshore workers. Another cutthroat negotiation tactic is to cut the other person down. Use their weakness against them. It's actually really common. You hear this. It's not really very nice, and I certainly don't use these tactics, but they are something that's out there. And what does that mean? It means someone says to you while you're trying to get a job, well, you've never done this before, but it would look really good on your resume if you want to do it for free. No, that's not right. Don't do those things to people, especially when they're starting a career. But people do that. If you are at the start of your career, you can expect that's going to happen to you. Somebody's going to say, you have zero experience doing this. If you want to do it for experience only, then come work for me for free. Like, an internship is fine. That's when you're doing it by choice. But when you do it, when you come for a job and they turn it into an internship, it's not usually very nice. So that's a cutthroat negotiation tactic that is common, that you should be aware of, and that's not a nice thing. When you get an employer who does that, I mean, sometimes it could be. I shouldn't say that. There are times it's like a consolation. So I'm not going to hire you, but if you want to be my intern, you can. That's a different scenario. But when they use it like, oh, look good on your resume and try to persuade you, that's when it's sketchy. Another sketchy cutthroat negotiation tactic is to use semi-legal payment terms as a negotiating power, meaning We normally pay 2 weeks in arrears. That means 2 weeks after you're done doing the work, that's when you'll get the payment. But if you want to get paid a little quicker, we could give you a lower salary, or, you know, stuff like that. Or if you want to get paid off the book so we don't pay taxes, we'll also hook you up a little bit. Those are sketchy cutthroat negotiation tactics because honestly, they're not honest, they're not legal, but I mean, maybe they could be legal, but they're gray area laws. And that's something else to be aware of. Payment terms. Make sure you know the payment terms, how you get paid for whatever it is you're negotiating, be it a job or a business deal. Make sure you know if you're expecting the money upon completion, it's got to be written out. Sometimes a normal thing is to have like net 14 or net 30 payments for certain things. That the word when they say net 14, net 30, that means get paid 14 or 30 days after completion of work. That's normal in some industries. In other industries, payment upon delivery is normal. Make sure you know what's normal in your industry and what you're trying to do. If you're trying to get a job, some places do pay 2 weeks in arrears. That happens. And if you want immediate payment, then make sure that's known. If you want to get paid once every week instead of bi-weekly, or some parts of the world monthly, then make sure that's part of negotiation tactics. People will often use that against you though, say, well, we'll pay every week but at a lesser salary. So just be aware, those are kind of crushing it tactics, man. It's like just really to crush the person down. There isn't really any loss in a lot of cases to the employer, so just be aware of that. That's what you're up against. This is all I got for you today. Plus the boardwalk ended and now I'm walking with shoes on the beach in Hollywood, Florida. So I'm done with this video. Thank you all for watching. Like, share, subscribe. See you all in the next video. Coming out to Hollywood, Florida. Heck, coming out to Hollywood, California and Hollywood, Florida. Although honestly, this Florida one is a lot more beautiful. So come on out here and I'll see you all in the next video.
Yeah!